It's about all the light we've got. This is basically where we make the sound from. So on my feet I've got like dancing shoes, which have got thin soles so I can feel where the notes are with my feet. And then you've got 3 keyboards, a great organ, which is usually the strongest, the most powerful. A lighter organ called the choir. And a more full-bodied one in the swell. When I was 21 and I was preparing to take my fellowship at the Royal College of Organists, I was appointed organist and choir master at this church. You can see the typical galleried inside, so there were people up in the galleries. There were a corner of Scots people who used to come regularly, and we used to call it Scots Corner, because whenever you had a metrical psalm, suddenly there was huge volume from that bit of the church because all the Scots people were singing their traditional metrical psalms. The organ console in those days was down in the centre of the front row of the pews, and the pipes were up in a gallery behind the huge pulpit. And so I used to clamber through a little door there and go down into the organ pit to play and direct the choir from that position. So it was a bit like one of those old-fashioned cinema organs that used to come up at the beginning of a performance and then go down, except that it never came up, it was always down.
You might need to do a little bit of something to make it sound a little better. This is not what actual saxophonists do, I'm just saying. This is a very old saxophone. This instrument here was built around, as I said, in the 1940s-ish, maybe a tad later. It was owned firstly by someone who was in the French National Concerto, if I'm not mistaken. Then after a while it got sold to this jazz musician in the countryside where I used to live, who used and abused it for the next 30 odd years until he didn't need it anymore, and he sold it to my parents for about 100 quid, which is dirt cheap for a saxophone. And then from there I got it repaired by a friend of mine, and now it's in my hands. A good saxophone would cost you about 2,000 to 3,000 quid. This one is ancient, dirt cheap, but it's trustworthy. So it has its quirks, and the quirks work either amazingly well or horribly, and there's no way I'm predicting it, and that's why I love it.
Sorry guys, can I be friends with you? He's a cool guy. You look like David.
My parents used to have a set of bar stools, wicker bar stools, and I got wooden spoons, and I'd beat the crap out of these wicker bar stools until my mum went nuts, and I literally broke them. And then eventually my dad offered to give me driving lessons, but I didn't want to drive, and I said I'll have a drum kit instead. And he was like, well, how much is that going to cost? So I found one in a local paper for about, I don't know, 150 quid or something like that. It was ridiculous. It belonged to a punk rocker and was absolutely beaten up. But it was a lot cheaper than driving lessons. See, Gabe's very creative, my son's very creative, all my kids are very creative, and you can be creative as a mathematician, you can be creative as a physicist, you can be creative as a toilet cleaner. Creativity doesn't stop at an instrument or music or the arts. You can be creative doing so many different things. I think be passionate and love what you do is the most important thing to whatever you do. But no, I'm kind of sort of smugly glad that they've gone off in their own sort of tangents and done their own thing. I'm sorry, that was good.
Oh, don't be silly, it's okay, it's alright. I played really well.
I know.
You know, we only,
golden assist. He only won. I went to Jarvis's and stayed there till 5 in the morning, which is a bit stupid. I don't know. We got talking. So to put it into perspective, I went to work yesterday and worked the bar, and we had the Hot House drag on, like 7-foot tall drag queens, all dolled up and everything, doing a roast of one of their friends, and then went straight over to Richard's afterwards. Madness. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sounds like it'd be lovely if they picked up an instrument and wanted to play along with me one day or something like that, but I don't see it as a loss or a lack. I think there are so many people playing music. I think just passing on the creative bug is enough, and if they're creative as an accountant, or creative as a solicitor, or creative as a baker, whatever, great, that will come through in the way they are, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's like an appendix, it's almost like a disease or an addiction in a wonderful way, and because it has such a wonderful effect when you get it going on the people around you, that feeds you, so it does become addictive in many ways. But yeah, I love the fact that my kids are creative and do their own thing, and I think ultimately, yeah, I'm excited to see what they're going to do with their creativity rather than worrying about whether or not they pick up a guitar and go in my footsteps, because they're hard footsteps to follow.
A lot of organists play a lot of arrangements, and a lot of people like arrangements of things for the organ. So Nimrod, for example, from Elgar's Enigma Variations, that wonderful which sounds absolutely brilliant on the strings as Elgar originally orchestrated. I really don't like arrangements on the organ because by comparison to an organ is a clumsy instrument. It goes, when you change registers, it tends to change qualities of sound very fast. And some people find that the most fascinating thing about the organ, that it can change colours. I only really like organ music played on organs. But I can't see the point, especially nowadays when we can all have access to good recordings and live concerts. I can't see the point in trying to make an organ sound like an orchestra, because it never will. My great-grandfather had been an organist, and my grandfather had been an organist in a Methodist church up in London. And I had played the piano from a fairly early age, and it seemed a fairly natural progression since I was involved in going to church and so on to learn to play the organ. There was a family connection, plus the fact that there was a church connection. My mother was a singer and tragically lost her voice through a thyroid condition when she was only about 30. I can just remember her singing, but it reduced her voice from being a high soprano with lots of high notes and a lovely clear bell-like tone to a range of about 5 notes that she could croak, which was pretty heartbreaking for her really, because her singing was very precious to her. But that fascinated me really, because I couldn't understand where my mum's voice had gone to. I was about 7 or 8 at the time. And it seemed weird that Mum could one minute be making this wonderful noise and then suddenly, because the operation wasn't done sufficiently carefully, and because she was in a life-threatening condition, illness-wise, they had to operate and get on with it. And unfortunately, they damaged the muscles around the larynx, which reduced her ability to sing completely, really.
Family's been in love with music, not in a professional way, but in like a hobby way, and that's the way how we connect way. We've always loved music. We've got games in the household that just surround the concept of art, music, and sound. And I joined a band when I was 14, a rock band with some of my friends, put in place by the music school I was in. A year later my brother joined it, and 2 years later my mum joined it. So we're all in that band playing music. My mum singing, playing bass, my brother playing trumpet and tuba, me playing saxophone, and I had some other friends doing guitar, drums, everything, and it just became this really lovely event, this really lovely moment of just sort of like a family union of music, and it was really nice.
when I was growing up in my household, all my family are, my immediate family are engineers, and I wasn't an engineer. I was a black sheep. I just wasn't ever going to do that. Whereas my extended family, my uncles and my grandfather, they were all musical. So it wasn't that it was forbidden in our house, but you didn't often hear music. And it was only when my big brother started to get into DJing and brought back records from like Kraftwerk and would put them on in his room and I'd sneak a listen that I got into that. And then as a kid I was in an accident and I broke my foot, not clean off, but I broke both bones. And I had to go live with my grandparents and then for a period of time. And every morning with my English grandparents, my grandfather would play music, classical music. So you'd always wake up to music and always go to sleep to music. And that was divine. That absolutely saved me. So when I came out of that and came home, I really wanted to get into music. My dad didn't have time to show me. I didn't know anyone who played until I joined secondary school. And I just couldn't figure out how to play a guitar. I just thought I'm never going to learn this. And then slowly and surely I met people and they showed me a few things and I just blundered my way through it. But it was certainly, it was definitely a necessity. It was a necessity because my childhood had a lot of trauma in it. It wasn't particularly anyone's fault. It was just my upbringing was like that. So I found my solace in music. It was like a paracetamol. It was like somebody turning the volume down on all the grief and turning up the joy. I've stopped a few times to go and work desk jobs and other things, and I never last longer than a year. It's kind of a bit of a joke with my kids and my family, my partner. And it's not for want of trying. I think that's once you get bitten by that bug, or it becomes something that's therapeutic, or it becomes something that's a necessity, becomes part of your construct. One of the things I'm thankful for with my parents and my dad is that I wasn't forced into doing it. In fact, quite the opposite. And he probably wisely knew, don't do that. You know, if you want to make money and you want to have a financially secure life, and stay away from music. He never said that, but that's probably the one thing he was like, oh God, So no, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. It's very difficult. It's very challenging to be artistic. I wouldn't change it for the world, but then also, if you want a smooth road, go for a smooth road, become an accountant. But then life isn't about smooth roads. How do you grow? The path less travelled is far more fun, harder, but far more fun, and that's the truth. So,
That's something that